Democrats at this point in time are touting the reduction in the total funds down from 3.5 to roughly $2 trillion, and that's an appeal for Senators Manchin and Sinema. They say on the chopping block at this point, no free community college, perhaps reduce funding for home care for elderly and for the disabled, reduce paid leave, and a reduction of the child tax credit to just 1 year from the previous 5 years. The Wall Street Journal editorialized about that just today, and I want to read a quote from the Wall Street Journal, get your reaction to it. Quote, but the sunset is a ruse since Democrats plan to renew the child allowances ad infinitum. The real cost over 10 years is $1 trillion and another $1 trillion the decade after that. This is a huge addition to the structural deficit and entitlement to the middle class without a work requirement. Your reaction?
I think that's exactly right. When you hear them say we're going to reduce, what they're saying is we will have fewer years of this particular program in the bill. But that doesn't mean they intend it to go away. They don't want to have a 1 year child tax credit. They intend all these programs to be permanent. And so the structural deficit that I saw in the House bill was something that looked like $3.5 to $4 trillion over 10 years. We came into this situation with a big structural deficit. To add to it is to go the wrong direction.
This is occurring at a time where we are seeing inflation. The administration maintains that this is a temporary situation, in large part as a result of the supply problems we're seeing, and lack of chips, the ships out in port in Long Beach and Los Angeles. Is it, in your mind, a temporary situation or something more permanent? And could this bill contribute to it?
Well, it's important to recognize that it's a supply problem relative to demand. And there's a lot more demand out there because of the $2 trillion stimulus that was passed in March. It was totally unnecessary. And so if you think of all those ships off the coast of California, sure, half of them are probably here with the Christmas season supplies. The other half are here with stimulus goods that are trying to be delivered. So that has exacerbated the inflation problem. And, year to date, we're at about 7% annual rate on the CPI. Target is supposed to be 2. It's going to come down, but it's not going to come down to 2. It's going to remain high through 2022 at least. And then past that really depends on how much the Fed tightens. So yeah, I think that the previous policy errors contributed to the inflation, and it's here for the foreseeable future. If they do what they're talking about doing, just steadily shorten the life of these programs. So we have 1 year in the child credit, 2 years of paid leave, whatever it might be, and they keep the taxes in place for 10 years. If you think about it, what they've done is they've front-loaded the spending and they've back-loaded the pay-fors. That's another stimulus bill, and that'll make inflation much worse. And to end up there is the worst of all worlds.
It's also occurring at a time, as you well know, as all Americans know, that we're seeing lots of help wanted signs everywhere. It's remarkable how extensive it all is. Now, Democrats in many cases maintain that it's a result in part of the fear of COVID, childcare problems that many workers are having. Others say that it's a result of the payments that were given to Americans, which disincentivize work. Your thoughts?
There's no question that in normal circumstances, the unemployment insurance benefits were far too generous. The $300 benefit meant that about a third of workers made more on UI than they did their previous job. And there's a lot of evidence that if you have a high replacement of your normal earnings with UI, unemployment is longer and in the aggregate more prevalent. So that was a bad policy. But we're not in normal circumstances. We are trying to avoid the virus, and we are trying to deal with the childcare issues. And so I think it contributed. It's not the only reason we have a lot of people who are not back in the labor force. And now that those payments are gone, we're going to start to see things normalize to some extent. The other thing to remember is that, one person's labor shortage is the other person's supply blockage. And so those are the same phenomena. We have to get people back into jobs here. It's also true around the world. And these global supply chains are not working well because there are people not working all around the globe.